Playing defensive is something you have to master if you want to improve your fighting. I split everything you need to know into 3 sections to help you survive getting keyed and turning it to kills. First is setting up in a good defensive position. If you take a weak position to start the fight, it'll end quicker than it begins. Every time a pro plays defensive, the first thing they do is make space. Doing this creates more opportunities for peeks and angles, as well as give you an escape in case one of your walls gets taken. It also makes it difficult to track exactly where you are, so when trying to get heals off, pros will make space and change layers to buy themselves time. One thing you want to make sure you do when making more space is expand away from your opponent. Not only does this make them have to reposition to pressure you, but it also eliminates the risk of getting piece controlled. In this example, Epic Whale got hit down to 3 HP, and while he made space to change layers, all his opponent had to do was place one stair and continue the pressure. He had no difficulty tracking him at all, making for an easy kill. Something you could do for a quick layer protection is build a backward stair before expanding. If you already have a cone or stair in your box, you could just edit it up in the direction you're getting pressured from, then expand out. A lot of people struggle with getting stair flips down consistently, but they're so important to have down because you can't afford to mess that up while getting pressured. In these examples, pros are flipping their stairs without any issue, and Muzz even messed up placing the stair above him, but hit 2 quick edits to get back above it. So if this is something you struggle with, put yourself in a 1x1 and practice flipping the ramp in every direction. If you didn't already know, all you have to do to change the direction of a stair is move your crosshair diagonally from one of these boxes to another. There's no need to move your crosshair all the way across the stair to flip it. On the topic of hitting edits, it's important that your mechanics are good enough to not mess them up while expanding away, because all it takes is one missed edit for you to take heavy damage or end your game. When making space, you also want to make sure you're placing the middle walls in your boxes. A super easy way to get kills when keying someone is to take advantage of missing pieces, and as you can see in these clips, none of these players placed the middle wall and died because of it. The most important part in making space is using it. This may sound obvious, but people get so caught up in making a ton of boxes, then when they get pressured just make more, wasting a ton of builds for no benefit. In this example, he had 700 mats but kept ditching the space he made, eventually leading him to 50-50 since he had none left. You want to be able to play from your box, and if you have to leave, it's to another one you already made. Destiny Jesus vouches the L-shaped box, and it's a good defense to have because of the angles you could create and safely hide behind while getting counter damage. The last thing you want to do while making space is look for counter shots to slow down your opponent. In the clip I just showed, he never got set up and looked for counter damage and only tried to get heals off, so his opponent never slowed down their pressure because there wasn't any threat of taking damage. Whereas in this example, Iomzo was pressuring G-Money, who kept reboxing but eventually looked for a counter peek. While it didn't hit him, it slowed Iomzo down, allowing him to make a box, get heals off, then make a play to win the fight. Next is learning how to defend and counter against pressure. Before I cover things you should be doing, I'm going to show you things you shouldn't be. First is taking trades and 50-50s. In this clip, Belusi had this player in a cone and just edits him down. What he should have done was go behind the wall then edit the floor, that way he was avoiding a 50-50 and had an escape plan in case his play went bad. You don't want your game to come down to whether you can execute on the play or not. The goal is to minimize the amount of risk taken, and an example of this is anticipating getting your build stolen. In this example, this player was in a single box, pre-fires for counter damage but gets his wall stolen, and instead of immediately editing up his cone and making more space, he stands still for a second, realizes he doesn't have the wall, then reacts, but it was too late by then. In this clip, Muzz caught an opponent swinging and opened up and took a shot, then reset. Since the wall is weak, the player can one-shot with anything, so Muzz edits up his cone in case he gets it for a safe escape. However, he did make a mistake right after this, and that was editing on the player with their gun out. In my last video, I talked about how Peterbot gets a bunch of free kills just by holding his gun out and waiting for his opponent to make an edit. From watching a bunch of games, even from pros, this is a common mistake people make. To counter this, either bait the shot by editing and resetting, or simply peek from behind cover. Don't feel like you have to peek an opponent from a certain angle just because of the way that they're pressuring you either. If that angle puts you at a disadvantage, switch up your position or start pressuring the builds that they're on, so they have to take a different approach. It varies in every situation, but you'll notice that pros rarely give opponents a chance to hit them off a peek while playing defensive. Instead of coning from a peanut bar like most players would, Polarize edited the window, coned the opponent, and reset the wall, and eventually got the kill. Later in the game, he took damage and had to make sure he didn't get hit, so he made a bunch of window edits and reset to bait the opponent's shots, but also made this peek that I mentioned in another video where you could shoot your opponent but they can't see you at all. This is a go-to peek if a player is pressuring directly in front of your wall. If you want a video going more into depth with peeks and angles, let me know in the comments. The easiest way to get damage is when you catch a player swinging their pickaxe. Most players will incorporate pickaxe baits into their pressure, but if you time your edge correctly for when they take out or swing their pickaxe, you could get free damage. Better players know how easy it is to counter someone pressuring with their pickaxe, which is why you see them using their weapons to pressure a lot more. While it's hard to get counter damage against this, it's still possible mainly through pre-firing. Whenever a player is spraying your builds, you shoot the second it breaks to get damage, then place the wall again. This gets easier as you play more, but if you're a beginner and need to get the timing down, you could practice on a map like this where a bot sprays the wall and you just have to time the shot for whenever the wall breaks. While it results in free damage most of the time, there's scenarios you want to avoid going for pre-fires, most obvious being when you're on low HP. If the player is spraying your builds and you stop holding the wall for a second as you go to shoot them, a bullet or two is bound to get through your box, and if you're one shot, it could cost you your game. Another scenario is when you have no escape or safety following a pre-fire. If a player is trying to exploit your box and you pre-fire, they'll most likely end up in your box, and if you have no extra space to move, you're committing to a 50-50, and like I mentioned earlier, you want to avoid those when possible. Peterbot did a good job of that in this clip where he pre-fired the player and they got into his box. Now even though he hit him 100 and has a damage advantage, he still leaves the box and edges from the side to ensure a free kill without 50-50. Scenarios like this pop up a lot where a player is over aggressive and tries to get into their opponent's builds. This is where having space comes into play, because you could allow them in your box and have them trapped inside all your edits while you take a risk-free angle. This happens a lot with players getting impatient or being unaware of their surroundings. Another play you can make on someone playing really aggressive is to make an aggressive play back. In this example, Reed had this player on low HP and was trying to get in his box to finish the fight. The player made a bunch of space, then knew Reed was going to try to get in, so instead of holding his walls and making peeks, he just 50-50'd him as he was jumping in, which Reed clearly wasn't ready for as he was swinging his pickaxe to jump into the other box. The last tip is one you'll get better at the more you play, but it's predicting when opponents drop down the pressure. In this example, Cooper is getting pressured, and as the Omzo dropped on his wall, he coned him and got an easy kill. In the even simpler example, this player was going to pressure his box and telegraphed exactly where he was going to drop down, and the Omzo instantly edits for a free pump and gets the kill. While I can't cover every defensive play that you can make, here are a few that I don't see very often that work well. First is this close peanut butter peek. Whenever someone pressures from these two angles, they usually get free damage because the opponent doesn't peek properly from the peanut butter. But when you get closer on the peanut butter, they can't see you and you can get damage off for free. Another play you can make from this angle is ramping under the opponent and side jumping for a free pump. It's hard to track where you are and you can easily catch opponents off guard. When the player drops down the ramp, the most common play is to cone them, but some players edit a stair on top of their box to prevent getting coned, but to counter this, you could place a stair and edit it so they have no protection. You could also just do this as an alternative to placing a cone. One peek that I never see players do is this jump peek from the top of the box. It can be difficult to hit depending on the angle you take, but difficult to predict and counter when done correctly. The last play is if a player is pressuring an angle but has no wall in front of them. You can edit that and take the wall, piece control, and then safely peek them. The piece control part is optional in some cases, but you need to make sure that you take a safe angle when editing your wall. In this example, this player had the right idea but stood in the middle of his window and died because of it. While you could initially play defensive and look for counter damage, there'll come a time where you need to play aggressive. Usually after a big counter tag, the opponent will back off and try to heal, and that's your opportunity to play aggressive and capitalize on that play. You may not be confident in your W keying or know what angles to take, but that's something you'll need to work on to close out fights. I made a video covering what Peterbot does to close out fights. I'll leave the link in the description. There isn't anything fancy to playing defensive, it's just understanding the basics and playing off your opponent. Just to recap the main points, you want to make space before anything else, utilize and play from the space you make, expand away from pressure, anticipate getting walls taken and have a way to counter it, avoid taking trades and opening on players with their gun out, read opponents before making counter plays, utilize pre-fires, capitalize on over-aggression, and don't be afraid to play aggressive. These are things you can apply in every fight and make you a better player right away. Even if you know all these things, if you continue to practice them, you'll see improvement in your fighting. I base my videos off of what you guys are looking to improve, so let me know in the comments what you want to see next. If you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe and use code HOWL in the item shop. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.